we have Jack Hidary and Vipin Surelia. Jack is the founder of XPRIZE, co-founder of XPRIZE, and on the advisory board of Google X. And Vipin Surelia is from the NPCI, which is the National Payments Corporation of India. And we are just going to have a fireside chat between the two of them. And it'll be for about 15, 20 minutes. And then we just take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Well, Vipin, great to have you here. And so today's discussion has been around payments and Bitcoin. And maybe first you should explain what your division of RBI does. That would be, I think, good.
You got it back.
Good thing to start.
Oh,
There we go. Fire.
So I would just like to.
Can you just introduce?
So is there a fire department in
Yeah, he's going to introduce
I have worked for a regulator since '97. I have seen traditional payment mechanisms, and the last conversation I heard from my friend was that money is something which is used universally and it is ubiquitous. But the way we use money is totally different. Every one of us have a different way of using money. There are corporates who would like to use money differently. My son uses money differently. I think he spends more money than me on an iPad buying new games. That is one part. Second part, why it interests us and why we want to be here, be present here with you is because it has an impact on central infrastructures. Do we just go away with the emergence of the currencies which are coming there, or do we have a role to play where you can connect back and leverage the central infrastructure which is there, and it's all established infrastructure which is there. So with this initial comment, I would like Jack to go ahead.
Well, just some introduction, but I have a few questions for you.
Ooh.
So we'll start with those. And then I want to open it up to anyone here who has questions for any of the topics we discussed today. And then from a regulatory point of view, how do we view it? So my background is as an entrepreneur. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I created a company called Dice, Dice.com. Dice is the largest IT job marketplace in the U.S. and it's used by many people here in India as well. Has anyone here seen Dice, heard of Dice? Yes. So, from there, I had the idea of creating new companies and created a few more and sold those. And Dice today is publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So it's been great to see. It's like having a child and seeing it grow up. And so it's great to see it continue to succeed. And then more recently, as Surelia has mentioned, I've been really focusing myself on Moonshot Thinking. And so this is really taking tech to the next level. So instead of just startups, we're thinking about ideas that would really change the world. XPRIZE.org is one organization that does that. And this is an organization where our first prize was a $10 million prize. And to win this prize, you have to go to space and back twice in 2 weeks with a vehicle that you build without a government. And 21 teams decided to compete, and one of them won. And they went up, back twice in 2 weeks. The guy's still living, so that's good news. And not only did he win $10 million, but that team then was approached by Richard Branson. Does anyone know what Richard Branson did with that team?
SpaceX.
Right, so Virgin Galactic, right. So Virgin Galactic came out of that. So Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson approached the winner of the prize and said, it's great you won the $10 million. I'm now willing to give you $200 million over the next 5 or 10 years if you can let me use your technology to create the first space tourism service. And so that's the origin of Virgin Galactic. Elon Musk was also inspired by the XPRIZE to create, and Elon sits on the board with us. So myself and Larry Page and Elon Musk and many people like that serve on the board to really drive these ideas forward. And SpaceX in part was inspired by the idea that governments didn't have to own space anymore. And I think right now, Nishith and his colleagues are actually writing a paper on space law. So the idea that we can even talk about space law, that is, what is the law of private companies going to space, mining asteroids, mining the moon, comes from this idea of the moonshot thinking around that. Google X, I also serve on the board of Google X Labs, and this is where we're really focused on moonshots, but within the Google X Lab. So a different model than X Prize, but also a very valuable model. One of the most famous ones that comes out of that right now is the autonomous car, the self-driving car. And that's another example, just like Bitcoin, where there's a lot of innovation happening, but the regulatory bodies are just trying to catch up, right? So if you're a regulatory body of transportation, how do you deal with a self-driving car, a car that has no driver? Because normally we think about agency, we think about somebody driving the car, they are responsible. And so how do you think about the context of regulatory in the self-driving car? So anyway, that's a bit of moonshots. But let's come back to payments now and Bitcoin. So when you guys think about Bitcoin, how do you initially kind of approach the Bitcoin concept? Is it something that you guys are studying right now, or maybe just kind of some general comments first before I have more specific questions?
So I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm here in a personal capacity.
Okay.
That what all
Appreciate it.
regulators
Sure.
do. So the initial reaction to anything that comes up new in the market is always apprehension. And the
After that, fear.
no, not fear. The world is different at both the ends of the kaleidoscope. So if you are an end consumer, you will always look at speed and the convenience of doing a transaction. But if you are somebody who is in a regulatory seat, you will always look at what is the safety and how efficient the scheme can be. So within these 4 pillars, any payment mechanism which emerges are evaluated. These are the 4 pillars through which any new innovation that you want to do are filtered through before taking a call on what is the way forward. So that's the route which the central banks take, not only in India but most part of the world. 2013, it's not just the central banks who are watching this development. There are other bodies also. 2013, there was a similar meeting of the central banks in Johannesburg, December 2013, to decide what to do with Bitcoin. Should we stop it or should we let it proliferate and let us watch the development? So the stance since then is let us watch the development, it's not harming everybody. That's the global view.
So right now, kind of just let it proliferate, don't kind of clamp down on it.
Right.
But at the same time, your feeling probably is that maybe it's too early to create a lot of structure,
Right.
regulatory structure
Right.
around it. Let it grow up a little bit first.
In fact, when I spoke with Governor Rajan on this, and his view was the same, that it's a new technology. We just don't want to nip the bud,
Right.
this time.
Don't squish it.
Because it's still evolving. So rather than just taking a negative view, in fact, I would say this is one of the most pragmatic kind of thing I've seen from the government side, which is let technology evolve. Yeah, there will be something here and there, but we don't want to stop it at that point in time, even though a lot of apprehensions may be there, but it's not easy for government to think in these terms. But I'm glad that Mr. Rajan also told me the same thing which you just mentioned.
Thank you. The other thing is there are many layers of payments which are there in the country. 90% of our economy is still cash. Electronic is just 3% of the overall number. Remaining 7% is check. So it's just another innovation. Even in electronic, you will find that mobile is something which has just started emerging. And mobile is where the focus is, because mobile is the technology which the central banks and institutions like National Payments feel are going to help make the banking services more ubiquitous, with now almost 45% of the banking households being included in the banking sector. So there is still 55% of the work which needs to be done, and focus is on mobile, making banking accessible rather than on new technologies, which are the next generation technologies.
What is your prediction, or the prediction of RBI in terms of credit cards and credit card usage? Is there any feeling that you have about the use of credit? Right now, as you said, it's mainly a cash society. Do you have any prediction about whether that will increase in terms of use of credit cards? Or?
So India has traditionally been a savers economy.
Yeah.
So I save before I
Spend.
but with this generation we are seeing a lot of change happening. So if you look at the order, the debit card is almost the one order more than the credit card in the country, and we believe that the economy is going to remain a debit economy for a longer time. So on credit card, there is no view except that, in fact, if you look at what NPCI did, we launched the debit product first. It has been there around in the market for almost 2.5 years. Yeah. Now only we are planning of launching a credit. So credit is still not the focus. It's the other technologies which can be, or which needs to be introduced so that the debit culture continues in the economy. So there is still some time away, at least 5 to 7 years before credit culture starts coming in effect.
And I'll ask a few more questions, but then please think of your questions you want to ask and throw them out as well. Let me also turn now to a different part of payments, which is in the US and in Europe to some extent, there's been a huge proliferation of crowdfunding, right? The idea that when you want to start a company, you want to launch an initiative, even crowdsource a film, many people can send payments over the internet all in one pot to do that. And recently the United States Congress passed a law, we call it the Jobs Act, which allows people, today on Kickstarter, you could definitely crowdsource a project, but you cannot get equity for that project. You can't actually sell equity online in those projects. But the law just changed in the US, and the SEC, our Securities and Exchange Commission, just issued the regulations around people can now issue actual equity in a company or in a film or in a project in exchange for an online payment that is then crowdsourced. Do you have any thoughts in terms of payments that are now not just between people, not just for goods and services, but payments that actually go over the networks for a crowdsourcing of a project or of a company? Has the regulatory bodies thought about that at all yet?
Not within the banking regulator. It's more to do with the securities regulator. Yeah. Like we have the RBI as a banking regulator, there is a Securities and Exchange Board of India. I'm sure they would be looking into that, but not within the banking.
Right. But right now, I think in India, it's not really come to a head yet in terms of that kind of
That's
regulation. Right. Yeah. So I think that that's going to be some interesting. You know, a lot of people in this room are entrepreneurs or want to become entrepreneurs, because that's something that there are always VCs and venture capital, but I think that's going to become an interesting aspect as to how to fund these kinds of things. Are there any other questions first, just before I start asking other questions, in terms of people's ideas?
Yeah, so earlier you said that security was one of the major concerns. Mr. Rajan in December also said that security and volatility are concerns of the RBI, and he said that they will subside over time. My question to you is what can companies like ours do in this moment in time to make regulators feel more comfortable?
Talk to the regulators more often. Create visibility, give them comfort in terms of security and the efficiency. It's just not the security, it's the efficiency which is.
What do you mean by efficiency?
What do you mean by that?
Efficiency, I'll give you an example. We run a service called, I'm sure you would have heard about it, IMPS, the Immediate Mobile Payment System. So there are still concerns which banks and regulators have around whether the mobile transactions are secure or not. But I don't know whether if you are aware, since 22nd of November 2010, when this service was launched, it is running 24/7. It has not stopped at all. And we also started like entrepreneurs on a very small scale, did some 22 transactions on day one. And last month we did 13 million, this month we are expecting 15 million. And these are the transactions which are coming from guys like you. So we are very keen, we want all that complexity which is there, which you feel, if we can somehow create infrastructure centrally where we can manage the complexity, and if you can simplify the interface, the user interface at the front end, that is what we are looking at. I'll give you two examples what we have done on that. We have created this Aadhaar infrastructure, something equivalent to your social security ID. So we have a centralized mapper, and today when any government wants to do a benefit transfer, they just use your single variable, your Aadhaar number. They don't require any other information. All the complexity of the IFSC, the routing code, the bank account information, we have taken it away by creating one single repository. We are planning to enhance that repository. We are planning to include the mobile number as a second variable itself. And we have come out with a specification, a set of specification which we believe will promote and help guys like you, which we call the Unified Payment Interface, using which on a mobile, I can also use pseudonyms to transfer funds. I don't need to remember your bank account. I don't need to remember your IFSC, the bank identifier, etc. So that's the kind of innovation we are also looking, where we can collaborate with you guys. And we are open to taking, not crowdsourcing of payments, but crowdsourcing of ideas. We have started organizing hackathons. We go across different centers, and we have, the last one we organized on last Friday in BKC itself. So we are looking forward for your participation.
Vipin, let me come back to your point about the banked and the unbanked, because again, the majority of people in India still not necessarily have access to a lot of payment services. So the rise of the smartphone actually is going to obviously affect this in a big way. Today there are about 350 million smartphones. India will rise to about 700, 800 million smartphones within the next, say, 36 months at the outset. Xiaomi, Micromax, so many companies now coming in with cheaper smartphones. How are you guys thinking about going from a society that will, has today's current level of banked and unbanked to one where 80–90% of people in the next 36 months will have at least the possibility? They may not download and install it, but they do have the possibility of connecting to the payment systems. How do you think about that massive change?
We believe we have already created that. We are a step ahead. How many of you have tried star 99 on your mobile phones? Just try out star 99 hash. It even doesn't require a smartphone.
Does it erase my phone?
I wish it could. Just try star 99 hash and see what is the menu you get. NUUP. So this is a service.
USSD code running.
Yes. So this is a service which even doesn't require a smartphone. It's a USSD, something between SMS and the data plans which you have on your phone.
So welcome to NUUP.
So this is a national unified.
Man, that was the effect.
Yes.
USSD.
It buzzed.
This is a gateway we have created. We are providing basic banking services on this, using which any person having a bank account, he does not necessarily need to have a smartphone.
So you worked with the mobile operators to encode that in?
Yes.
Okay, so were they required to put that? Was that voluntary? Was it a conversation? What was the...
It was closed room, tough conversation.
Like this one.
No, this is more friendly with lots of laughter around.
Yes,
But
yes.
there
was no laughter in that room.
There you had all the telcos coming in saying, why should we do this?
No
Then
charge.
there is Mr. TRAI chairman, and I must tell you, the banking regulator, at least banks listen to the banking regulators.
Yeah.
But the telecom operators, the experience is totally different. But it took us a while.
So when did this kick in? When was this?
So we launched it last year on 28th of August. The Prime Minister of the country dedicated it to the nation. This is available. You don't need to do anything. This is the tool that you can create.
So
You don't
walk
require a
us through it.
smartphone.
So somebody does that, they put in the first 3 digits of their
Bank,
account,
yeah.
and then the banks have all agreed to tie into this?
So there are 40 banks which have already tied up
Okay.
from 28th of August. We are
You can add more banks, I
yes.
assume.
So that's where the network effect is going to kick in.
And so how would that then play out? So then literally tens of millions of people then could tie with their bank and make payments.
Right.
And what would the transaction fee be?
So transaction fee is what? The highest fee that we charge today is for a check, which is ₹1.50.
I'm saying, are the mobile operators?
IMPS is also charged. IMPS they charge
What do
up
we
to
charge you
15
for?
rupees or something.
So that is what the bank charges. As a network, we just charge 50 paisa. We don't charge anything more than that.
So are the mobile operators, are they allowed to add more charges on top?
Yes, so it's ₹1.50.
That's
Sorry, you got debited
Okay.
for ₹1.50. So we are still working with TRA if we can bring down those prices, because we see that as an entry level
That was
barrier.
a negotiation give to the operators.
Are you looking at something for smartphones?
Smartphones, there are a lot of things which are already available. I'll give you this example of the smart guy. You would be aware of Paytm. So are you aware how many accounts, wallets you have created in a space of 1 year? Any guess?
10 million?
No, it's 80 million.
80
80 million in a space of 1 year.
Wow.
And we are not, this country has the capability not to have a single
80?
80.
80.
This country has a capability not to have single Paytm. This
One
country
third
has a
of the
capability of
US.
each one of you
Has
setting
a
up a Paytm.
What traction have you seen on the NUUP? Have you seen it being used?
Not at all. 1 rupee 50 paisa is the
Is the problem?
Yeah.
problem. So we
That's
are
why I
meeting
said
TRA
smartphone
chairman
project's free.
tomorrow at Delhi. We are having a conversation with her. So bring down the prices further.
I have two specific questions. So, really appreciate a comment on wait and watch on the Bitcoin space. But I wanted to ask, India is a Bitcoin scarce company. There's more demand for Bitcoins, but we don't mine enough Bitcoins. So can we, as a company, I'm a Bitcoin entrepreneur, can we import Bitcoins freely without fear? And the second question is, can we run a Bitcoin exchange in the country without fear?
So I'll answer you. So that's the answer.
For both the questions?
Yeah, both the questions.
Just do it twice.
No, once is enough.
I have a question, sir. What inspired you to become a regulator?
Pardon?
What inspired you to become a regulator?
Oh, shall I try?
When he
that
was a
one?
child, I will become a regulator.
No. In fact, I have a very interesting journey. I have been working with a regulator for a long time. But what I've realized is I am deconstructing everything that I constructed. The check infrastructure, which I constructed back in 97, 99, I am making sure that it is going to die down faster than what we believe. The corporates still want to hold on to checks. Unlike popular belief that it is government which is keen on checks, government checks are only 2% of the entire ecosystem. It's the corporates who write almost 55% of the checks. So what inspired me, so there was this friend of mine who wanted to take this RBI test. So I appeared on the test with him, he failed, I passed. So that's as simple as that.
Was it a dare?
Yes, it was a dare.
See?
But I am, sorry.
So in your MBA class, was getting a regulator's job a choice? There must have been all the guys in your IIMs for.
But I have never regretted it any single day. The amount of learning that I have got and the opportunity to work on the kind of projects that I have worked, I think only the regulator could have given that opportunity. I have worked on the RTGS project, generation 1, now there is a generation 2 which RBI launched last year. And the biggest moment of my life was in the interiors of Rajasthan. I travelled once and I saw a 74-year-old man doing, "Mujhe RTGS karna hai, I want to do RTGS." So that's something which fills you with pride, something that you have created for the country. Then I had a chance to work on NEFT, worked on CTS, now working on the RuPay, IMPS and the other initiatives. So I've never regretted a single day I have worked for the regulator.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So, like now if some venture capitalist or some investment comes into Bitcoins, right? And there is no clear policy on it, right? So, and say, because it's a wait and watch, it may, how would a foreign investor or a foreign VC or how would they protect their investments in an essence?
It's a risk-reward game, nothing more than that.
So basically, it's permitted, but people have to see whether the company in which investment is made, whether it is doing everything properly and legally. So that's the thing.
So, in fact, the more inquiries that come to us are from the non-traditional players, including there are proposals, there are a company in Taiwan which wants to start the worker remittances based on the Bitcoin. In fact, there are multiple requests for Bitcoin-based central infrastructures to be created, and that is why I also mentioned one of the reasons to be here is, does it make sense for the central infrastructures to collaborate, or are these central infrastructures not relevant in this jurisdiction?
So do you think if the community gets together and self-regulates and comes to you and says, this is what we are doing and this is the problem and this is the solution and let us do it now, and do you think that kind of dialogue is possible between
Certainly we are open for that kind of dialogue, any day.
Any other question?
Yeah, I have a question. The RBI has the prepaid instrument guidelines, and the way the definition of prepaid instruments were, you call it stored value, etc. Do you think that somewhere Bitcoin actually falls within that guideline in a way?
So, see, as I mentioned, there is no specific view on virtual currencies, and as long as, and you would be aware that even within the guidelines and after the guidelines you require a specific regulatory approval.
Yeah.
And to answer to the gentleman's question also, I think it's a matter of time before more and more people start applying back to the regulator using Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. It's not just Bitcoin. There are other schemes also which are approaching that we want to do things in a non-traditional way. So RBI is open to that.
Do you see any applications of Bitcoin-related technologies in building, improving the infrastructure or reducing the cost of transaction?
You mean the blockchain itself?
Yes.
So this is one conversation that started right before you came, which is the use of blockchain, but not to make currencies per se,
But
to do
other commercial applications.
Like
Like what about in the payment bank?
Like remittance actually
Like
is.
the policy has been very
Remittances.
active in the payment bank.
Remittance.
so remittance, I already told you that there are a lot of companies which are approaching
you.
it. Yeah.
And what is your response to that right now?
So we are telling them you apply. There is a process for application, you apply to the regulator.
Okay.
An educator.
And it's a well-defined process. It's not that the regulators cherry pick. They used to do cherry picking before the Payment and Settlement Act was constituted. There is an act called PASA, Payment and Settlement Act 2007. There are guidelines on how to apply. It asks a lot of uncomfortable questions, but if you are able to sail through that exam and the regulator sees the reason, he'll give you the license to do things.
So you said that there are no regulations today, but then you're also saying that for remittance or
On
using
virtual currencies, there are no
on yours.
regulations.
Yeah, but
On the
if you're
payment
doing-
and settlements, there are well-established guidelines which are there.
So if you're doing remittance, even if it's powered by Bitcoin, you should go down that
Yeah,
route.
yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Other questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the coolest things I think about the RBI is the fact that Mr. Rajan is an electrical engineer who's also single-handedly one of the few people who called the economic crisis in 2008. I was curious to know what percentage of the RBI are people like him that are technically, able to understand Bitcoin like that.
In fact, lot.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Cool.
And RBI hires from campuses as well.
You went to IIT, right?
Yep. He's my college senior.
That's exciting.
Mr. Rajan is my college senior.
Actually, before IITs and I think came up, most coveted job in India was in RBI.
Is it?
Yeah, interesting. And everyone who, economics or anything that they were looking for that. Yeah.
See, in fact, RBI has a hiring policy, hires
It's a
people
hi-
with a very
clean
diverse
policy,
background. And that really brings value. So it's not just economists who are hired. So there are three streams within RBI. One is statistics and the other is economists. And the general pool of people that comes from a grooming perspective also, over a period of time you spend with RBI, you would have worked for 25 different companies. Each department looks like a company.
So Vipin, just sort of in the next 10, 20 years, what are some of the big themes? What are some of the big changes that will happen in the currency payment kind of landscape?
So cash is something that we wish should go away. I really wish in our lifetime we are able to make that happen. You will be surprised, 12% of our GDP is still cash. Brazil is the only country which has as much high cash which is there.
Are you saying that you want cash to go away because of the potential of corruption and things like that when you have cash to sign?
Not just corruption, it is
Right.
got a lot of challenges. Plus, to central bankers, there is a cost of printing cash and the whole
Logistics and
distribution. So, I'm sure you would have all heard of a very small equation, MV equal to PQN, where M is the money base regulator requires, V is the velocity. So, and P is the price of goods and services produced in economy, Q is the quantity. So, regulators' interest is, and when we spoke about efficiency, from our perspective, efficiency is I should be able to transfer money anytime I want, anywhere I want, to anyone I want. That's a simple definition for people like us. But from a regulator, if we increase the V, which means the velocity, the speed with which money changes hand between individuals, the regulator requires small m, he requires a small currency base to manage the economy. So it is in his interest that the velocity of money is increased more and more.
Over the last couple of months, a lot of countries have come out with regulation to do with bitcoins. Any idea at what stage we are as a country to come out
I can't
specifically?
answer that.
So it's underway, is it?
I can't answer that.
But will there be a future for us? acceptance of bitcoins in this country will be a future?
It is not accepted today. So it
Like
can
an
only be
illegal way.
future.
Well, Mr. Rajan said that he believes that in 5 to 10 years, something like Bitcoin could replace cash.
So that's the statement you should believe.
Yeah.
He said, is it legal to pay for a good in India with US dollars?
No, it is not legal.
I know where he was going. He had a question right behind that one. Other questions? Other comments?
My friend had a question on
Yeah.
payments bank.
Yeah, about the payment bank policy, you guys are pretty active in that space. So do you think there's any sort of innovation you guys could think of, maybe using the blockchain or something to sort of further innovate within the payment bank?
So there are 41 proposals which have come in, and each one of them have a lot of innovations, not just around the blockchains and bitcoins, but a lot of other non-traditional instruments which everybody is proposing. Not only along the payment instruments, also the processes, and there are a lot of innovations which we are seeing on how people want to do. Somebody spoke about peer-to-peer lending, so most of the proposals are around peer-to-peer lending as well. There is another feeling that is there, that all the innovations that are coming in the market, while people want to transfer money cross-border, there is some resistance on their being able to do it as separate legal entities. So it's not just about the remittance chain, it's just about how two entities can operate within different jurisdictions. So there is a home country jurisdiction and there are regulations which are applicable to both. So Ashu, to answer your question, what we are also anticipating next 5 to 10 years or 10 to 20 years, we are also feeling that the regulations have to harmonize across the geographies if the way the world is evolving. And today you can buy, I bought an iPad cover from Amazon UK because it was much cheaper than buying it in India. Only thing, when it landed here, the customs added a fee back to it, which made it more expensive. But there are my friends who have bought
And they've not been caught.
and they have not been caught, they have got it much cheaper. I'll tell you the price difference. The iPad cover which I ordered on Amazon India was around 3,000 rupees. The cover which my friend got was for 700 rupees. Can you believe it? With the delivery charges included.
We're going to come back to Lending Club now, so peer-to-peer lending. So Lending Club is now a publicly listed company. It has a market cap of $3 billion. It does peer-to-peer lending. And then we also have On Deck Capital, also publicly listed now. All these publicly listed in the last 6 months. There's 4 more non-traditional platforms that are doing various kinds of lending that will go publicly listed in the next 6 months. So this is becoming obviously a very, very big area. Again, they're taking different business models. Lending Club is peer-to-peer and mainly for personal loans. On Deck is not peer-to-peer, it's their own balance sheet, but it's all in business. So there's going to be many permutations and things like that. So again, just recap, what is the current regulatory structure for this kind of lending right now?
So it's all a state subject. It's not there is no central legislation in this country. Every state
could make its own laws.
There are state laws.
Okay. So if that's the case, then if somebody wants to peer-to-peer lend from one state to another, they could be breaking the law, even if in their state it's legal.
Right.
In the other state, it might be illegal.
Yes. So where I spoke about harmonization across countries, there is a need to harmonize within the country across states.
Are there particular states that have been more proactive in approving things like peer-to-peer lending? Is there a state that you would identify as, wow, they're on the ball?
None.
Okay.
It's a long way.
Yeah, so I went to the Financial Inclusion Payment Systems Conference in Delhi last year, and the thing that they kept talking about banks and RBI was that that RBI is forcing all the banks. I think 1 out of every 5 branches have to open up in the rural, but the banks are pushing back, saying it's not profitable. I'm wondering, has there been any advances with regard to banking the unbanked, with respect to, I guess, some of the new technologies you've been talking about, and like what kind of solutions are going to be coming out? Like you mentioned the mobile phone application, but what else is happening?
So that's the regulator's answer to forcing banks to.
The SMS thing you showed us. Okay.
That's the answer. And see, earlier there were guidelines around you having to open as a bank branches in the tier 3 to tier 7 cities, but now it is left to each bank. So even those guidelines are revised. The banks just have to submit a branch expansion plan to RBI and that's it. Otherwise there is no restriction, no compulsion, no forcing of banks to open bank accounts. If you would have looked on the payment side, the regulator has been more forceful in terms of making the ATM, which is a cash dispenser, unfortunately, infrastructure available, and has given a license to the 9 white labeled ATM operators. Unlike US, the ATM market was still a bank-led market, but some experimentation has started on making them white labeled. So there are 9 white labeled ATM operators. There are guidelines around that cash needs to be available to the people in the rural branches also, and they should have more access to cash more frequently. Besides that, there are no guidelines from RBI.
And you know, Vipin, we have in the United States now more than 3 dozen Bitcoin ATM machines. So they actually dispense Bitcoins on a piece of paper. You actually get your
token ID.
record, your token ID on a piece of paper. So anyway, maybe that's coming soon here, we'll see.
Jack, what do you see in other sort of developing parts of the world in large markets? What are the innovations happening in this space, in the payments, transaction, financial space?
Well, I would say first, we are seeing, for example, M-Pesa is now in 90% of African countries, right? And M-Pesa has taken over almost every other payment mechanism, if you look at many of those countries. So, you know, the Amazon of Africa, okay, there's 3 companies that are competing to be the Amazon of Africa. They've had to contend with cash on delivery, right? So more than 50% of the transactions on these Amazons of Africa are, in fact, not really transactions, because they're really just indications. And you then have to have a scooter and deliver it on the scooter.
And then find out whether the guy wants it or not.
What most of these companies do is actually, if you order a pair of shoes, they actually bring it in 3 sizes, and or maybe 3 colors, and the person makes the final decision on the spot. So anyway, there's cultural issues around commerce and e-commerce that are being worked out. But M-Pesa, I would say, is a very interesting case study where it has just gone, it's really taken over so many things. I think also, beyond just payments, what many companies now are really looking at, particularly some startups, are micro-insurance products, other kinds of products, not just per se payment solutions of transfer of money from me to you, or other kinds of transfers, but what other micro-banking solutions might there be that we can enable with the phone. And I think we can also see this transition. A lot of these startups initially made their, even including M-Pesa, made their technology available on feature phones as well, right? So if you don't have a smartphone, you can still use it. I think we're going to see a lot of that migrate very quickly now, because even, if you look at Africa today, 900 million people, 700 million cell phones, mobile phones, and the rate of adoption and change out to smartphone is going to be super, super rapid. So in India, again, we're predicting 700 million smartphones within 36 months, maybe even faster at this point. In Africa, we're predicting 700 million smartphones within about 48 months. So this whole transition from this feature phone to the smartphone is going to happen really, really rapidly as these phones move down to a $10 to $20 price point with subsidy from the mobile operator, obviously. So I think that many issues are going to get resolved, where now there'll be third-party apps, and they'll be competing with M-Pesa to see what goes on. So I think that's been one strong point. And we're seeing some banks that have begun to move towards that adoption of these kinds of technologies and are interfacing and supporting these kinds of technologies. So I'm very optimistic around the opportunity. One of the issues that my group really focuses on is the gender imbalance between access to payment solutions. In the same household in emerging markets, if a man and a woman both have a mobile phone, it's 40% less likely for the woman to have access to a payment solution, even in the same household. So one, there's already a gender imbalance in terms of men and women access to mobile phones, particularly smartphones. And then you compound that with a differentiated access in terms of access to payment solutions. So to me, that's one of the most important things that we need to focus on as a society. And my group, we're supporting an effort that's going to be announced at the Clinton Global Initiative, the CGI, which is Bill Clinton hosted in September, right alongside the UN General Assembly, where we're going to focus specifically on getting mobile phones, with access, with defaulted, built-in payment solutions into the phone, specifically to women, and specifically to women who have been identified as women who have microfinance loans, businesses. In other words, women who have said, I'm going to become a leader in my household, and they don't have a payment solution. Because most microfinance companies, 85% are run by women. In some countries, 90 to 95%. Right? Bangladesh is a great example where it's 85%. There are some countries where it's 95%. So women are the breadwinners in those households, and yet they don't have the access the man does to the payment solution. So we want to really address that particular issue. And this announcement in September, I think, will begin to address that, where we're going to get these phones with payment already explained and literally on the home page, or the home screen, getting it to women who say, wow, I've started a business, I'm bringing in money, now I can move from the cash society to this kind of payment society. So that's going to be, I think, a very, very big focus. And I think we can't just kind of wait for it to happen. We have to, I think, be more proactive. So, I don't know if you have any other
That's a great initiative.
Yeah.
Just to add 2 points to what Jack mentioned, Bangladesh, there's a company called Bcash. Can you imagine how many mobile transactions they do a month? 40 million mobile transactions. Wow. It's much bigger than the other example you gave. Yeah. Another area of opportunity for all of us. Today, if you look at the ATM machines and the POS devices which are there, do you have any idea how many unique locations, if you look at PIN code, the ATM machines are available? Just 7,000. If you look at the merchant POS devices where we go and swipe our card, there are only 700 unique locations in India where those devices are available. So the next problem that we are anticipating is, if we want to convert cash into electronic, there is an acceptance infrastructure which is required everywhere. And how do you create the acceptance infrastructure? Maybe you can come up with some solutions on the mobile itself. Mm-hmm. So there are those $10 pieces like squares, etc. But there are further solutions which people are exploring on being able to do a transaction, do a verification on the face of the mobile itself. That's a great area of potential if you guys want to invest. If you are keen on coming out with solutions on that, kindly have a view on that as well.
Great. Well, let me thank you for your comments and everyone else for their comments, and it's great to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.